Hello, it's Joe Waxman here, and in this video, I want to look at the chart of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Don't forget to hit the like button, guys, and subscribe if you haven't already. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. He's a Taurus sun, which is pretty. I mean, that's not surprising. Taurus is well, with a name like Rock. Um, it's got to be pretty earthy. But yeah, he's a Taurus sun. Taurus rules well, it's ruled by Venus, so it is a very physical sign. All the earth signs are. But Taurus can I mean, I don't want to say like Taurus is all about, bodybuilding and stuff like that, but it certainly can be because it's very sensual, Taurus, right? And so Taurus can go out in different ways. Some Taurus really don't like to work out, don't like to be physical. Some Taurus can be actually kind of lazy. Others can be very physically oriented. It depends on other factors, obviously. There's much more going on than just the sun. But it is Venusian, Venus ruled, so it definitely has a lot of physicality to it, materialistic. Not that Taurus is, I mean, Taurus itself is materialistic. Not that all Taurus are materialistic. There's other influences, but here his sun is in the seventh, eighth house, moving into the eighth house, but still retaining some seventh house influence. And we can see that in a number of ways. I mean, first of all, I mean, wrestling is a very, it's a tough sport. And also the eighth house has to do with a lot of difficult things. In other words, I'm trying to relate it to his movies as far as he plays a tough guy role a lot and a fighting role. And that does have to do with the eighth house. We can see that with other actors who have eighth house influence, and their movies tend to reflect that. That's one thing that I think we have to remember is that being an actor is not just like, oh, they're just going to play any role. No, they have to fit the role. And that means that they have to have the kind of energy that the role requires. So he plays all different kind of roles, but he does have some of that eighth house element. I mean, we can also look to Saturn here, which is a little more in the eighth house quadrant, although in the ninth whole sign house. So that's eighth, ninth. So here, seventh, eighth, ninth. And it's not fully in the eighth house because that would, the sun anyway, because eighth house sun doesn't get as much light and therefore is not as prominent in movies, or they don't get as much notoriety for their personality. Their personality tends to become a bit more hidden. So I think it's a combination. We're getting a little bit of that eighth house sun, which would tend to make him a bit more tough and strong because the eighth house does that. It kind of beats you up a bit. You have to become tough to have that, to have sustain that eighth house influence. That scorpionic quality. Obviously, it's Taurus, so it's he's pulling in the opposite as well. And Taurus is quite physically tough as well, in a sense. Can be, definitely can be. I'm not saying all Taurus are, but it can have that very earthy quality. So yeah, that's interesting. Not surprising. His moon is in Capricorn, fellow earth sign, conjunct Jupiter, and this is not Jupiter retrograde. This is not a good it's not a dignified combination for the moon or Jupiter, although the moon and Jupiter do like each other and do well together. So, I mean, that is one benefit of this combination, is that moon and Jupiter really enjoy each other's company and do well together, but not in Capricorn, right? So that is a difficult combination overall. It's in the third house, fourth whole sign house. I'd say more third house, this influence. And if so when he was young, before he became a wrestler, or before he became actually interested in sports, he was kind of a hoodlum, and was arrested several times and stole, and things like petty crimes, stuff like that. So that we could relate to here. He has this undignified quality here with his moon and Jupiter. Probably not very religious. I've not even read a single thing about his religion, but probably not very religious. Probably much more, not probably, he is much more sort of business oriented, materialistic, business oriented, success oriented, right? And that's the Capricorn influence. It is, the Jupiter is slightly trine his sun, so that's not bad for Jupiter. But in general, this is, and also third house is skills of the hands, so he's going to be more skilled. Third house is good for, lots of things, writing, expression, communications, any type of skills of the hands. So wrestling falls into that. He moved around a lot as a child, which is interesting because we can look to the fourth house, Capricorn, Saturn, in the eighth, ninth. So ninth house travel, right? And also his ascendant Lord Venus in the ninth. I'll get to that more. He moved around a lot, and he's third generation wrestler. His father was Rocky Johnson. And then on his mother's side, there was also a wrestler. So that's really interesting. He was born into a wrestling family. But he got into football, and that took him out of the sort of petty criminal kind of hoodlum mindset and made him more goal oriented. Jupiter's ruling the sixth house, right? So that's important to him. South node in Cancer. So, in the 10th house. So he's already, as a young child, the first half of his life, he's thrust into the public spotlight. And so he gained notoriety pretty quickly for being a good athlete, right? Initially it was football, but also wrestling. And so that's activating the moon, pulling in Jupiter in the third house, right? Jupiter for the sixth house. And Jupiter's also ruling the third house. So, we could see that the MC Cancer, South Node, that's gaining him a lot of attention, and then competition, skills of the hands. So you can see where it's going, that he has this skilled hands and competition, and his ascendant Lord conjunct Mars, so he's kind of into like fighting and sports and things of that nature, right? And also the poor dignity of Moon and Jupiter in Capricorn would give him a way to vent that, to express that, because planets in poor dignity, they don't want to be nice, they don't want to they want to break the rules, they want to take the undignified path. Generally speaking, I'm not saying the person will, but those planets definitely have a tendency towards that, to be undignified, right? And so fighting, I think, allows for that expression in a non-harmful way, right? If you're taking wrestling, like you're beating your opponent in, hopefully not in any you're not like not in any illegal way, but it's still expressing that um, quality of undignified planets. Anyway, I think you understand what I mean. You're not helping your opponent succeed. You're trying to defeat him. So it does involve that. Anyway, so we can see that coming together. Here, the south node, in the sixth house and third house. Ascendant Lord Venus, or sorry, ascendant in Libra with Uranus in Libra retrograde, about 4 degrees from the ascendant on the 12th house side. Now, I mean, I'm a little surprised to see this because this tends to make somebody very independent. It isn't a little bit in the 12th house. And to me, the rock kind of seems pretty status quo. Like compared to me, I have Uranus on the ascendant retrograde, although mine's in Scorpio, so it's a bit stronger. And other people I've seen with Uranus on the ascendant are really quite rebellious. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And if they're not, like, for instance, Karen Carpenter, but she was a drummer. So that is expressing the Uranian quality. And so I'm not sure exactly how this is playing out. I tend to think that he's overpowered. First of all, Libra is not a very strong ascendant. It's not an independent ascendant. So I wonder if the rock really has yet to grow into the full power of the Uranus. I mean, first of all, it's a little bit in the 12th house, so that is that's going to hide it somewhat, but Libra as well is going to minimize it. But he should be, at least in my estimation, much more independent and rebellious. And I remember he said one thing, I can't remember, but it was against the status quo. So I think he has it in him. And I was like supportive of him, and I can't remember what it was, and I wish I had a way to figure it out. But then he backtracked and he took it back because he's in Hollywood, he makes movies, we all know that. And there's a very strong controlled agenda in Hollywood to conform to the party line, to the status quo, to keep up appearances. And if you don't, they're going to ruin your career, right? The only people that can get away with that are people who are beyond their control, like people like Mel Gibson, or I think like can't even remember his name. He's a comedian. He's hilarious. You can do it. That guy who is always in the Adam Sandler movies. I mean, he just doesn't care, and he's deeply rooted, and he's got such a long history that he doesn't care about his career anymore. Not that he's powerful like Mel Gibson, but I think he just doesn't care, so he just says what he wants. So a few people can get away with it, but most can't because they value their career too much. So he's not gonna rock the boat. He's not gonna stand out. Even though I think like behind the scenes, he really has his own mind. He's just not putting it forward. He's being a bit too Libran about it, people pleasing, conforming to the consensus. And that's sort of Libra's weakness. I mean, Libra's great in many regards, but unless there's a strong planet like Pluto, I mean, Uranus, I would say it should be strong enough, but maybe if it was a bit more in the first house. In any case, he's not willing to risk his career to be independent minded enough. Uranus does have this very strong opposition with Mercury and Chiron. Mercury's ruling the 9th house and the 12th house. So there is some, and again, this can be this strong opposition we can see because it's first 7th. So we can see definitely like wrestling, because here you have an opponent, it's one-on-one, 101 is very much seventh house. Sixth house is also any competition, but 101 is very much seventh house. And so that is indicated here. There can also be a lot of conflict and competition in his personal life and things that we don't know about. He is a Libra ascendant, so he's not going to want to appear in any way that is going to be compromising to his very Venusian self-image. In other words, he's going to keep that hidden as much as possible, I believe. It's not going to let his personal conflicts get in the way of things. But as far as there's some issues here that regarding, I mean, we already know that his Jupiter's in Capricorn, so his ninth house issues, his ninth house beliefs, are not very, in other words, he's not religious, he's not God oriented. He's far more materialistic. And furthermore, there's some difficulty with he has some issues regarding that, right? Regarding his belief, regarding his philosophy, regarding his connection to God, as well as I think faith in life. Yeah. I mean, in any case, Uranus opposite Chiron is minus Mercury is a very painful opposition, and it's sort of generational because these two, Chiron's not a planet, but these two bodies move at very similar speeds, so they spend a lot of times in opposition. I have the opposition, and so it's kind of generational and represents a sort of generational pain, because Chiron is painful wound, rejection, and Uranus represents some shocking events, shocking things. So there are events in his life that are very painful, tied to his Mercury, so his intellect, but also his belief, values, not values, belief, and higher thinking, connection to God, whatnot. At the same time, Libra is ascendant lord. Venus is ascendant lord, and eighth house lord is conjunct Mars in the ninth house. And the conjunction with Mars, we can see, is making him very physical, because obviously Venus is representing his first house, which is his body. And so Mars, his body is becoming very Martian. Whatever planet you have conjunct the ascendant lord has a very strong influence on your body physicality. For instance, my ascendant lord is Mars, and even though 10 degrees away is Saturn, Saturn strongly influences my body in a negative way, because Saturn's a malefic, and Mars and Saturn are both very, contractive, right? This is much more harmonious, because Venus and Mars are sort of like yin and yang together. But like, let's say Mars and Saturn, that's not a good combination. They're both too contractive. So like, I can't be that physical. I get pains. I have like, my body just can't handle it. I have all these, I've always had issues. I cut my knee down to the bone. I broke both arms in 3 places. I have nerve damage. And like, I've always had knee pains. And, if I try and work out too much, my body just like hurts like really badly. That's Saturn, right? But he, he can handle it. He can work out. His body loves it. It's Venus and Mars, right? They're yin and yang, man and woman. That's balance. It's harmony. So that's quite prominent for him. Ninth house. Now you wouldn't, I wouldn't expect ninth house, but he did go to college and he played college sports. He wanted to be a football player, but he wasn't drafted. Then he got into wrestling. But I mean, ninth house, well, number one is Gemini, so, and there's a mutual reception between Mercury and Mars, so that's quite prominent. That's strengthening, that strengthens this Mars and this Mercury, and it connects it to the seventh house of opposition others. So like wrestling, the one-on-one. But ninth house also is very high level of education. So if you take it to mean that he's taking his skills to a very high level, it kind of makes sense in that regard. Like first, fifth, and ninth are trying each other. Fifth house represents education, but more like basic education. Ninth house is secondary education. So he's taking sports to a very high level, which he did. I mean, he was one of the most celebrated wrestlers of all time. And even if you say wrestling is fake, there's an element of realness. It's real fake. I mean, because they do hurt each other. They get injuries. He's gotten injured. They hit each other with steel chairs, and they really hurt each other. They have scripts. They script it out, but they go off script too. I mean, at least that's what I've read, and that's what seems to make sense. It used to be a bit more fake, then they upped the realism, and because it was popular, they got a lot more fans and money if they could make it look more real. So they were actually beating the crap out of each other, not to, hopefully not to real permanent injury, but but they were making millions of dollars, so it's worth it. Anyway, doesn't have a lot of aspects here. He's got Saturn opposite Neptune, and the opposition again is just in general, oppositions are about, opposing forces, right? With actual other people. When you have planets opposite, you often meet that in real life as other people or other situations that you have to combat and meet head to head. So that is something. Neptune and Saturn generally, by the way, Uranus and Mercury are quite brilliant together. So even in an opposition, it's going to create some very brilliant kind of thinking. Don't know where that's applying, except that he is a businessman and he owns a production company, a film production. I mean, obviously, we know that he's been in tons of movies, but he owns his own production company, and sometimes he's the producer as well as the star. Sometimes he just produces things. We see that with North Node in Capricorn, with the Moon and Jupiter in Capricorn in the third, fourth house. But this opposition is interesting. I mean, Neptune in the second in Sagittarius, that's actually the same position I have. Terrible with money. Like, if there's no other influences here. But his Jupiter is in Capricorn, so he's probably not as bad as mine. Mine's in Taurus conjunct South Node, and that's really bad. But anyway, for money. Anyway, this will tend to make him just expansive, and it dissolves his hold on resources. So he might not be very good with money. However, it's opposite to Saturn. So especially as time goes on, Saturn's going to have its influence and contract and crystallize this Neptunian thing. So he becomes more as he gets older. Probably when he was young, he was not very good. And this perhaps relates to his petty theft as a child or as a young man as well, because when Neptune is in the second house, you sort of don't know what's yours and what's others. It sort of like blends everything together. And second, eighth, also eighth house will tend to have a similar influence. Eighth house is, I see theft often in the eighth house. So just having eighth house influence is undeveloped as a young person can lead to that sort of behavior, criminal behavior, shared resources and all that. So there's that influence here. But as he gets older, it's going to change to the opposite because Saturn obviously likes maturity. And Saturn in Gemini is okay. It's not terrible. But these two are having an influence on each other. And that will get better as he gets older. Saturn in the 8th house, let's see, it's ruling 4th and 5th. He's made a comment that he's not opposed to, like, if something about running for president. So I know he's thinking about politics, and we can see that with the 4th house. But Saturn is in the 8th, 9th. 9th house would be okay for politics, but 8th house also is okay for politics. However, not great for 8th house can ruin reputations. So it's because it's the death, right? So periodic death. So it's not good, especially if your son's connected to the 8th house. By the way, I forgot to mention, sun's ruling the 11th house. So sun's ruling his groups, networks, and popularity. 11th house popularity. So having the 11th and 7th is helping him achieve lots of popularity. But back to this. And we saw this in wrestling as well, that sometimes he gains a lot of negative attention. That's the 8th house influence. Sometimes people don't like him. And especially initially, he had a lot of haters in wrestling. And then I just read this. I never followed the rest. I was like too old at that time to be interested in wrestling. I just didn't care. Maybe not too old, just I didn't care. So I wasn't following it, but he initially, especially, he had a lot of haters. So that 8th house can do that because it can ruin your reputation. That death, the whole death thing. Also, Pluto in the 12th, it's trying the North Node, so it's becoming more active as he gets older. But Pluto in the 12th house is very difficult because there it's in the subconscious, and if it's not here, there's not too many negative aspects. Pluto has a light square to the moon, but it's in the same sign, so it's not super bad, but it's not great either. I mean, there's some negativity here with his moon, helped by Jupiter, but Capricorn and Pluto definitely, so he can get pretty negative. I'm sure you don't really want to be on his bad side. Not super bad, but not super great either. But Pluto in the 12th can be quite destructive. Because there's hidden in the 12th. Any planets in the 12th have a quality of being hidden, meaning that you don't experience them. They're living in the subconscious, so they're not making themselves known in the conscious realm. And Pluto has destructive quality as well. And Pluto in the 12th, I've heard a lot of things, like a lot of people in jail have Pluto in the 12th, in prisons, because 12th house represents prison, and Pluto represents power and control. It's our deepest wounds as well, and there's a lot of resistance to change. So my Pluto's in the 12th, and what I found is that it really does drive me towards destructive behavior if I don't consciously take care of it. Like, because I study astrology, so I know it's there. So it's in my conscious mind. So I'm like, okay, Pluto, I know you're hiding back there. I have to take care of you. I have to heal myself. I have to, uncover the pains that you're hiding from me in the subconscious, because otherwise I'm just going to be drawn to destructive behavior that I can't control, right? It's just beyond me. It's like the subconscious drives you. It's a driving force. It's that thing. It's the things that we do that we don't know why we're doing it. We just can't help ourselves, right? Whether you're, eating out of the a pint of ice cream with a spoon from the container, or drinking too much, or smoking, or whatever, what you're doing. it's that sort of thing, and that happens with Scorpio, eighth house, Pluto, hard Pluto contacts wherever. It's just it'll take a different form. It's particularly tricky in the 12th house. So I know he's made comments about like alcohol and tequila and stuff like that, which makes me think it's more than just something light for him. He definitely has his binges, put it that way. Um, and he needs to take care of this because he can drive him towards destruction, especially being so contracted, right? When you work out a lot, you become really contracted, really intense. Like it drives it, it's like drives up the testosterone and makes you more aggressive and angry, things of that nature. Right. So, yeah. As far as acting goes, that's the Mars ruling the second, with mutual reception. It's not a great mutual reception because there's no degree aspect between Mercury and Mars, but it's still there. And Mercury and Mars are his two strongest planets. Mars ruling the second and seventh, pretty high in the sky. But it's conjunct his ascendant Lord Venus, so that's also very prominent. He's not like a great actor, but it's like he's got this. He's kind of like Arnold Schwarzenegger, where he's just like excuse me, got this dynamic body, like tall and muscly, and he's, got a nice face. I guess a lot of movies call for that sort of thing. In any case, and he does have that eighth house influence that kind of brings in that grittiness, like that where it just makes sense that he's like beating people up and kicking butt, stuff like that. In any case, let's look at his draconic chart, which I always love. Okay, here we get the south node conjunct Pluto, and then the north node in the sixth house, and that's prominent. Definitely want to see that because the sixth house element of competition, fighting, yeah, that sort of thing. That's very prominent for him. And lining up with the draconic nodes, this Pluto, that makes a lot of sense. Second house influence here for the speaking roles that he always does. Movies generally you need some second house activation to have the voice. Let's see what else. Fifth house for sports, and here it's Moon and Jupiter are in a good sign. They're in Pisces. Jupiter rules Pisces. Moon's fine in Pisces. So we see underneath, probably a good guy, just has plays a bad one on TV. Sorry. What can I say? Bad joke. Yeah. But anyway, Pisces, Moon, and Jupiter. I mean, that's quite a good combination for Moon and Jupiter. And the fifth house also is really prominent for lots of things. Sports, games, performance, entertainment, all that. So that's quite good. Mercury, Chiron. It's not really conjunct anything, but it's ninth house. Not that significant, I guess. Sun in Cancer, quite prominent, and moving towards the 10th house. Saturn in Leo, that's in the 10th, 11th whole sign house. This is for leadership. I mean, for authoritarian kind of leadership, like politics, leader, CEO, that sort of thing. Any sort of authoritative leadership role. Saturn's great in the 10th. Saturn in Leo is not that great, but it's kind of tyrannical and dictatorial because there's too much ego. So if he can learn to control his ego, that's probably good for leadership roles, but definitely indicates that he's quite authoritarian and has, with the sun here as well, he aspires towards leadership. And then Mars and Venus and Leo. This is great for being on stage, fame, notoriety, ego. Leo as well, also. I mean, I have my Mars in Leo, so I know this, but Mars in Leo is the sign that will most likely go to the gym because Mars is the physicality, the male physicality, and Leo has the pride issue. So more than any other sign, Mars and Leo wants to go to the gym and work out, right? So that's quite interesting that he has that Mars and Venus and Leo, and in the 11th house of career success, hopes, wishes, dreams, community, networks, and popularity. That's quite prominent. And I just want to pull up the notes, see if there's anything interesting there. I'm just going to look for tight conjunctions. Neptune conjunct the south node of Mars in the second house. I mean, Neptune is good for acting, right? In the second house. So, and then the south node of Mars, you know, they're probably just small influence, helping his speaking ability. Here we have the generational Capricornian south nodes of Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter. And this is just shows a lot of familiarity with the way the world works in its Capricornian ways, material, you know, gain and all that. Its north node is exactly, well, by 1 degree conjunct the south node of Saturn in Capricorn. So he's a good businessman, and he owns a business and that sort of thing. The sun is conjunct the north node of Mercury and the north node of Mars. So that's, again, for speaking, for working out, it's probably influential there. Also the south node of Mercury, both Mercury. So making him more intellectual. Mercury rules skills of the hands as well. It's quite prominent, I think. I'm gonna skip that. There's not that much else that's really very prominent in this chart with the nodes. So we'll just leave it at that. And oh, let me pull up one more thing. Sorry, let me get rid of the nodes. They're taking up too much space. Okay. His moon, his Venus, and his Mars are all out of bounds. All right. So moon, Mars, and Venus. Venus is ascendant lord, and then conjunct Mars. These are both out of bounds, and so is moon. So that just shows that he's willing to go further than other people, you know, with whether it be with working out, with, you know, attitude, with he brought in like a very negative attitude towards the WWE or WWF, the wrestling, and that was part of his gimmick, you know. That ties into this undignified moon and Jupiter especially, but Also with his it being out of bounds, his moon's out of bounds, and Venus and Mercury are not Mercury, Mars are out of bounds. So he's just pushing himself further than people normally would. And I think that's a big reason for his success. Yeah, so that's quite interesting. Out of bounds, for those people who don't know, it means when the planets are following the ecliptic, meaning the sun goes on a certain path, the planets follow the same path across the sky. That's called the ecliptic. When they go further beyond a certain amount, I think it's 23 degrees and either 17 minutes or 27 minutes, something around there. They're considered out of bounds. So they're just going a little further. They're spiraling, but they're spiraling a little further out. So you can take that to mean whatever. I mean, it's just further out. They're further out. They're outside the norm. They're going a little bit extreme. So that's what that means. Right. Okay, well, I think that's pretty much it for the rock. Stop sharing. Guys, please hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Book a reading with me. My website is macroastrology.com, and my email is macrogoldmachine@yahoo.com. And leave a comment if you like, and I'll see you again soon. All right, thanks, bye.